Well, it's another episode of Full Moon Fridays here on the Outpost Unknown YouTube channel. We continue to get 4 or 5 views per episode, guys, so I think we are really taking the internet by storm, reviewing these movies that maybe we thought were going to be really, really good, and it turns out we were very wrong about that. Tonight, joining me, I don't want to forget the introductions, joining me from Sweden, of course, is Borp.
Hello, I'm here.
And from America is Steve.
Yep, the regret in Matt's voice is palpable. Luckily, we do this for us, not for you.
I had a funny conversation with Alyssa the other day, and I was like, "Oh man, I gotta carve out some time to watch Curse of the Puppet Master." And she looked at me and she's like, "Nobody watches that show. Why do you guys even do it?" She's like, "Just cancel that show. Nobody watches." And she went on YouTube and she's like, "You get no views on this show. Why are you doing all this?" I'm like, "Babe, it's because we love Full Moon, right?"
Yeah, we are doing
Right?
this to amuse ourselves. If we cared about views, we would just delete the channel and not do YouTube anymore.
It's an interesting question, though, when someone looks at what you're doing and how you're deciding to spend your free time, because time is very valuable, right? We have finite lives. We could be watching anything other than what we're doing, and the people who don't understand, like they can't understand why someone would spend 70 minutes of their lives to watch Curse of the Puppet Master. How do you respond? Borb, what are your thoughts on this? Because we brought you in on this.
Yeah, it only took us up until this movie until we started having an existential crisis about this thing. Amazing. No, I thought about that too because I had a moment. I think it was last week where I was talking to someone. They're like, "Hey, do you want to hang out?" And I'm like, "No, I have to watch this Puppet Master movie." And like, "Do you have to?" You have to.
So odd.
Yeah, that probably says something about our mental states, but yeah. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I think it's something that people who I guess, even though we sort of hate watch these things a lot of the times, like I guess bad movie connoisseurs who just like to submit themselves to watching this terrible shit over and over and over again. It doesn't matter. Doesn't have to be Puppet Master. It could be anything, right? And people who don't do that, who have no understand, they can't ever understand how someone would want to do something like that. Like, why would you want to put yourself through the pain of watching these movies? And I think Alyssa even mentions, like, why don't you just talk about good movies with your friends? why does it have to be bad movies? Steve, what are your thoughts on this? Why are we doing this? Why do we continue to watch movies like Curse of the Puppet Master?
For what we're doing right now, like I maintain that we are not doing this for views. We are not doing this for the audience. We are doing this for ourselves. Everyone in our friends group is like a creative person to some extent, and doing shows, even incredibly simplistic shows where it's just us sitting there talking for a little bit, is an extension of that.
But to someone's argument, well, why don't you just watch good movies with your friends? What would you say to that argument?
Good movies don't always give you something to talk about. Like sometimes you watch a good movie and you're like, yeah, that was rad. And then that's the end of the conversation. Like watching like a truly shitty movie like gives you things to dissect and discuss. Like why didn't they do this thing that would have made more sense? Why wasn't this character that would have made sense to have them in this scene not in this scene? I think I find bad movies to be infinitely easier to talk about than things that people universally enjoy.
Okay, that's good.
I also want to say, from my perspective, someone who's never seen these movies up until now, I have this like weird, like, no, I have to do this. I have to make sense of this. I'm not going to make sense of it. I know that, but like, I'm this far in. I cannot stop now because at some point this all connects. This all makes sense, right?
Yeah,
right?
At some point the continuity all comes together.
Borp
We
is
just
like
don't know where it's at.
Borp is like 11 movies in and waiting for the payoff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, folks, we are now talking Curse of the Puppet Master. I think this came out 98, if I remember
I
correctly,
think
and
so.
this was after Paramount had basically given Charles Band the boot. I think Paramount was still involved with Puppet Masters 4 and 5, which we will get to in the next couple episodes. But this one came out. This was like the first Puppet Master movie that came out after Charles Band lost all of his funding from Paramount, big Hollywood
Do, do,
studio.
do we know what happened there, or like were the movies just not successful enough
Yes,
anymore?
Charles Band apparently lied to Paramount multiple times about the movies he was making, and it turns out he wasn't making them. Money was being shuffled around like a shell game, and apparently Paramount eventually had enough of it. And the other thing that also, at least according to the book that I have, the other thing that was also important in this area is by this time the VHS movie boom was over. And so in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, people would just constantly, I mean, you could literally buy a VHS for like $100. Like they would charge a lot of fucking money for VHS tapes, and it was a huge thing. That's why you had so many 80s shot on video movies that would show up in video stores. Like video stores were taking everything. Video stores started dying out. wasn't It wasn't the death yet, but in the late 90s they started to noticeably go downhill. People were renting less. They were being more choosy and picky about the movies they would put on the store shelves. It wasn't just literally everything. And so all of that contributed to financial problems with Full Moon. Paramount backing out was, I think at this time, Charles Band was basically whoring himself out to whatever he could to be able to scrape together some money. This movie was shot in 8 days. The guy who plays uh, not Toulon, I don't remember what his
McGrew.
name was. McGrew, yeah, yeah, what a name, McGrew. Um, that guy actually was like, "Oh, I'm sick," and missed multiple days of the 8 day shooting, so everything was crammed together there. This actually started as a snake movie from the 70s that they decided to take the story and replace the snakes with puppets. So that's something. It's called that's literally the name of the movie. It's just like
Oh, wow.
14 S's. The other thing interesting about this is they had no money for puppets. So almost all of the footage in here of the puppets is recycled from previous Puppet Master films. So all the stop motion was 6 years. It's all taken from other stuff. And so yeah, this was
Hey,
bad.
sorry to interrupt. But when you said in the Discord, you're like the quality of this movie on Tubi is terrible, and
Yeah,
I'm watching the beginning. I'm like, I don't know what Matt's talking about. This looks great, and then it's all the recycled footage that looks good.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah, yeah.
the thing
And I'm
about
like,
that,
damn it, I was fooled
yeah.
again.
And if you do watch Tubi, the Tubi version of it, Charles Band went through and remastered all these Puppet Master movies for Blu-ray because that's what the world needed. However, there are huge chunks of this movie where the 35 millimeter negative is gone. They have no idea whatever happened to it. So he had to take actual like standard def footage and stuff from a beta master of it and splice it all together to try to make it look enhanced. And it's good, and it looks bad.
Okay.
Like a lot of it looks real
Yep.
bad.
It
But
reminded me of like the quality of the footage of like what is it, Subspecies 4, with like the weird
mm,
doctor. Like
yeah,
it just looked very different from the previous movies. It stood out to me like this doesn't like you were
looks
talking
cheap.
about, yeah, you're talking about like it was actually filmed on film, and like I would have guessed this was like video, not film at all, had you not said that.
Yeah,
It's bad.
Yeah.
it's
So was this marketed as like a restoration?
the Blu-ray. I think it's like a high definition restored version from
Wow.
the best elements of all of the
Okay.
various VHS tapes and,
It's like
and pieces of 35 millimeter strips that we were able to grab out of our garage. So yeah,
okay.
looks real
Okay.
bad. It's one of the shortest Puppet Master movies. I think at that time it was literally the shortest Puppet Master movie. I mean, you take out the opening credits, which is just the greatest hits of all the stuff you've seen, the end credits, and I think it is less than 70 minutes long. And the book that I have, they really go into like Full Moon fans at this point just felt really burned. This was the first Puppet Master movie. It's not the 100% clip show version that we're going to see coming up here, Puppet Master Legacy. But this was the first Puppet Master movie that Full Moon fans were kind of like noticeably like, wow, quality control is now gone. Like they have no money. They are cobbling together stuff to try to, make something. And it's very, very noticeable here. It's so bad even that David DeCoteau directed this, but he used a pseudonym of Victoria Sloan because he didn't even really want to be associated with this movie, how cobbled together it is. So that's kind of like your backstory on Curse of Puppet Master. Um, if you guys don't have any other comments, I mean, we'll just throw it to
That's like,
Steve. Steve can take us through.
yeah, there's like very interesting because I threw this on, watched the credits, and I'm like, no, I know that this was directed by David DeCoteau. Like, what is going on? Am I watching the wrong movie? And it's like, no, he just took his name off of this thing, which is interesting because he kept directing Full Moon movies after
Yeah.
this, right? So at some point, they must have patched that relationship up, I guess.
The idea of pseudonyms, directorial pseudonyms, always has confused me because a lot of times people, Alan Smithy was the big thing that was like, if Alan Smithy's on it, that's what the Directors Guild defaulted to if you wanted to remove your name from a movie. But a lot of times, people or directors will use pseudonyms if the content is something they don't really want to be associated with. So let's say a lot of Wes Craven, for example, I think he directed porn films in the 70s, but he didn't use his name Wes Craven. There's there's stuff like that. You'll change your name. There's nothing in this movie that's particularly egregious. Like there's no nudity in this. It just as we'll talk about what it is, but I don't understand necessarily why David DeCoteau wanted to completely distance himself from this movie when all the other movies in his oeuvre are just as trash. I don't know why he would put his name on one crappy movie and not on another. So,
like somehow, some way, Curse of Puppet Master crossed a line for him.
apparently, Steve,
like
what is this
he
about?
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, sure.
It looks like he directed 4 movies in 1998, and they are all under a pseudonym, which is fantastic.
Are they
Weird.
all?
Maybe he was
Full
trying to
Moon
evade
movies?
taxes or something.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know.
Serious,
Well,
what are the other movies? I'm just curious. Are they all Full Moon or are they unrelated?
Shrieker,
that's Full Moon.
Talisman,
Full Moon.
and Frankenstein Reborn.
I don't know if that one's Full Moon or not.
Yeah, that one's a different pseudonym. The first 3 are all Victoria Sloan, and then one as Julian Breen.
Weird.
Yeah,
It's just so weird. Like I know, like when we were doing Gorefest at Tiffany's, we did an episode on some of the sort of sexy erotic films, and there's a lot of directors there that will use completely different names because they're like, I don't want it on there, or actors even. I don't know. That's a great mystery about this movie.
Yeah.
In all the movies of 1998, why did David DeCoteau use a pseudonym for these movies? Don't know.
Who knows?
Steve.
Are we ready to talk about this?
I mean, I'm trying to do everything I can to make this an interesting episode because I don't think you're going to talk very long.
Yeah. So Dr. McGrew, I guess, is the star of this movie. He is the puppet master. The movie opens with him like it looks like he has just finished some sort of science experiment, and he is taking something very small that we don't see, and he is putting it in a small box, and he's about to take it away. And all of the puppets are just like in a cage somewhere, and Dr. McGrew is talking to the puppets like, you know, I didn't want it to be like this. I tried. I really tried. But anyways, he goes out to the forest and buries this tiny thing that we'll come back to later. We find out his daughter. What's the daughter's name? Jane, I think that's it. I think that's her name. Jane McGrew is just home from college and hanging out with her dad.
Jane McGrew.
And we cut to like the next day, and we meet our main character Tank, whose name is actually Robert, and he like I don't know how to describe Tank. Like, is he just like very like timid, because people treat him like he's an idiot, but it seems more like he's
got
he's
vibes.
super conflict averse, doesn't make eye contact with people,
Yeah. I don't know if
apologizes for
he's like
literally
super
everything.
autistic or trying to
Yeah,
make it like he's autistic.
that was the sort of vibe I got, that they were trying to make him an
It's like
autistic character.
Clarence Rack Sling Blade with Billy Bob Thornton kind of. He's got the overalls and everything. That's sort of like the weird vibe that they're going. But then later on in the film, he doesn't act that way. So I don't know
It's
what they
super
were going
strange.
for. I
Yeah,
don't know what they're
I don't
going
know.
for.
He's incredible. I'm just gonna go with timid. He's incredibly timid, and he works at a gas station. And these four douchebag guys are just constantly like bullying him. Then Dr. McGrew and his daughter come up and basically defend Tank. And like the Dr. McGrew is like, bring it on. Dr. McGrew is like this like Bill Nye looking motherfucker, and like this he's wearing like a bow tie, but he is not afraid of these bullies. He's just like, come on, bring it the fuck on, let's fight. He don't give a shit. But ultimately, like, the bullies are scared away, and Dr. McGrew and Jane befriend Tank because they discovered that Tank is like an expert like wood carving prodigy. And so explain
It's
to
just
me,
funny the
because
way you say it. An
everything I
expert
said is
Yeah,
wood
right.
carving prodigy.
Like, Dr. McGrew is so impressed by Tank's wood carving abilities that he hires him on the spot. And so
Oh
Dr.
god.
McGrew runs like this tourist trap sideshow with the puppets. So like Tank comes back home to live with Dr. McGrew and just work there. And Dr. McGrew and Jane are just like, oh yeah, we bought these puppets at auction. They're alive. And that's all the explanation you get. They're
Now the
just
question
there.
here is, where is this? I know there is no timeline or
Yeah.
continuity, but like Leech Woman's in this, so it has to be before 2.
But also
So
Six Shooter is in this, and he was not involved with 1 or 2. So I think that's why, like, when I like last time we met to do one of these episodes, like I went looking for like the official like chronological like chart, because there used to be a chart on Wikipedia and it's gone now. And so I looked, at various other places, and some charts had this between 1 and 2, which I assume they did so because Leech Woman's there, and this has to be before she died. But other charts left it as like after Puppet Master 5, which is when this was released. So it's, I don't know. We're splitting the difference and we're doing it now. It doesn't make any fucking sense.
According to, and obviously the source here is kind of, I don't know what the source is for this, but the Puppet Master fandom page says that Charles Band considered Puppet Curse of the Puppet Master a standalone film, but then later was like, actually it's part of the continuity. So like,
No, it's not. No, it's not.
no, Steve. The creator says it's part of the continuity.
I respect it. The creator says this
Yeah.
is canon. That's just real fucking dumb.
I don't know if this means anything to you guys. This is backed up by the Action Lab comics, which have references to this movie in it.
No,
We need to read these comics.
Aren't
We
those
have
comics
to read them.
I think those comics aren't they the ones that were made by a fan who took it upon himself to
Oh, okay.
create a continuity? Like, so
I think so.
I think there was a fan that went through all the movies and like created storylines and explanations to make everything fit
Okay.
together, and then Charles Band's like, that's what happened. Like, it was just kind of like blessed by the creator.
I am genuinely interested to read these comics and see
Yeah,
how they try to take all of these threads that make no sense. And some mad genius out there, did they truly make it all make sense, or did they just create more problems?
I don't know.
I want
But
to
like,
read them.
this is so much fun for me, who's watching these for the first time in the chronological order of the timeline, where everything's just fucked all the time. And so I'm watching this for like 10 minutes, and I'm like so confused. And then I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is all nonsense. Like, this is okay. This is standalone. This is,
Yeah, like
I mean, it's all nonsense. But like, this is so far removed from everything else we've seen.
right. Like, part 1 and 2 could happen, back to back. Part 4 and 5 could happen back to back. Virtually everything else is a standalone because it just doesn't make sense when compared to the movie that came before or after it.
Is this the one franchise of any franchise you can think of? Is this the one franchise that is like unique in that it is so anti-canon slash continuity. Is there any other franchise that is as
The
bad
both
as this?
Yes, both
Okay.
like the Fox X-Men movies and the
Mm,
Paramount Transformer movies. They basically just have like negative continuity. Like it's just people just
Mm.
do what they want without any sort of regard for whether or not it makes any fucking sense.
yeah, I can understand the X-Men ones probably, but I wouldn't put the Transformers in this kind of category because there's just so many in the Puppet Master franchise that make no sense. Sheer numbers, and they don't even attempt to try to address anything at all. I don't know how many X-Men movies there were that were made by Fox back in the day, but to me, I mean, how
7.
many? There's like double that in Puppet
Yeah.
Master.
Puppet Master is
It's
certainly
crazy.
like the at the top of the mountain for this here because what are we out? There's like 18 movies and no connecting
Just keeps
threads
growing
throughout the
every week.
majority of them.
Just keeps
I'm
growing every
sorry,
week.
honey. We only have
Yeah.
47 more movies to
Yeah,
get through, and then I'll kill Full Moon Fridays.
yeah.
Give us
Anyways,
those
uh,
5 years.
yeah. So I don't know. We're watching this between parts 2 and part 4, and some people say it takes place earlier than that. Some folks say it takes place later. It does not fucking matter.
Leave a
Uh,
comment
okay.
below,
Yeah.
viewer.
Where do
Tell us,
you
Yeah.
where does
think
this
this
fit?
takes place in the official timeline? Because Leech Woman is there
Yeah.
even though she's supposed to be dead, and Six Shooter is also there even though he wasn't there in the movies that happened before this. Don't try to figure it out. Charles Band didn't care. You shouldn't care either. So, anyways, the puppets are just there. Like, yeah, we bought them in an auction. They're puppets. They're alive. We roll with it, and everyone's like, and I actually kind of like this. Everyone's just like super cool with this. Like, the McGrews are like, yeah, the puppets are just like family. Like Pinhead, like has taken it upon himself to be like Jane's like personal protector. It's like the puppets are just treated like family by Dr. McGrew and his daughter, and very quickly like Tank warms up to them, and so we get the background on like why Dr. McGrew wants Tank there. Dr. McGrew wants to create his own puppet and bring his own puppet to life. But he says that the secret to bringing a puppet to life, there's no puppet juice in this movie. We don't actually know like what's animating them. But he says like the key to like bringing a dead thing to life is to like put your heart and soul into it. And so he wants Tank to create like the most perfect puppet that he can possibly create, which is going to be hilarious when we see what that puppet looks like later on in the movie. Because Dr. McGrew has like all of these schematics, and it's like little tiny puppet hands and legs, and it's like 400 individual parts that Tank has to craft, and he has to craft them like absolutely perfectly for this puppet to have any chance to be brought to life. And so that's what Tank is doing. He's going to carve this puppet. Um, he and Jane get close and end up being a couple. They run
Well, that's the
afoul of
thing. Like he can't make the puppet because he's trying to beat Jane off with a stick because she's so horny for him.
yeah.
He's like,
I mean,
I'm here to
it's
just
a
build
good
this
problem to
puppet.
have, but yeah, so Jane is like just trying to constantly distract Tank, and Tank is very like focused on carving this puppet. But they
She
eventually,
literally at one point says, "Hey, I'm standing here naked," and Tank won't even look up
yeah.
because he's so into the puppets.
And then she gets offended, like, "Oh, thanks a lot." And then she yells at him like, "Robert," which makes him cut himself. So like, Jane's a bad influence on Robert. Robert is very
Yeah.
innocent in this movie, but
Yes.
ultimately, like they do end up getting together. The cops begin an investigation because Dr. McGrew's previous puppet carving assistant, a guy named Matt, no relation, uh, Matt is missing, and so the cops go to Dr. McGrew and like, where's Matt? And Dr. McGrew is like, I don't know, he left. Like, I don't know what you want me to do about it. Like, clearly, like Dr. McGrew like knows something, but he's not talking about it. Uh, Dr. McGrew also, I mentioned this, runs like this tourist trap sideshow, and so he just brings out the puppets and lets people watch them fuck with things. So the puppets, like they set up a target shooting thing for Six Shooter. Luckily, Six Shooter is a good shot because there are people standing directly behind these targets at all times. But yeah, like these puppets are not a secret. Like they're just out
Yeah.
there and people are going to look at them, which again, I think that's a cool idea, like embedded in a shit movie.
It's an interesting idea, but I feel like it's made worse because they give no explanation at all as to why these puppets are able to operate without the goo. Let alone the green goo. The whole point is like they're dying, right? In the last movie, Jester's dying, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna bring you guys back to life." Like they run
Well,
out of power, so to speak.
he was dying in the last movie, assuming that movie is the last movie that came before this one, because we don't fucking know, because that doesn't make any sense. Maybe
Right,
maybe
right.
this is actually Puppet Master 6, where the secrets of the puppet juice are well known, and they're not in danger of losing it.
I'm not going to give Charles Band that much credit. No, he fucked this all up, and I
He
think
did.
it takes cool kind of ideas and concepts and then removes it. This is also the first Puppet Master movie with like no Nazis, right? Like there's no Nazis
I
in
was thinking,
this.
it's
Eh,
like, wait a minute, like is that correct? Is this the first one with no Nazis?
Are there Nazis in the second one?
Yeah, I don't think there's Nazis in the second one. I think there's
Well,
maybe
you get the
references
you get
to
the
them.
flashback, right?
Oh,
Where
right,
the
right,
Nazis
okay.
show up and they shoot, or Toulon kills himself or whatever. But you don't. This is the one I don't think there's any references to Nazis in this. I don't
Yeah.
think.
It's the first one we've seen. I don't think there are Nazis in 4 and 5 either, which this came out
Okay,
after. I
continuity
don't know.
wise.
At this
Okay,
point,
yeah.
like there are no Nazis. Anyways, the
Mhm.
puppets are just kind of there, like alive for the world to see, and I kind of like that idea. So yeah, Tank's working on his puppet. He and Jane begin a relationship. The cops are investigating Dr. McGrew. Eventually, Jane and Tank go like walk through the woods together, and they run into the bullies again, who are very, very problematic towards Jane. Tank shows up, and he continues to be timid, but at some point he just starts choking this motherfucker, and like he's about to kill this guy. And eventually, Jane gets him to stop, and they leave. And Tank has a conversation with Dr. McGrew, and Dr. McGrew is like, "Yeah, you should have fucking killed him. Like, no big loss for if the world loses people like that." But Tank is like, "No, no, no. I lost control. I don't want that to happen again." He Tank has this anger inside of him that absolutely does not get paid off whatsoever in this movie. So at this point, like Dr. McGrew is like, fuck these bullies, and so we finally get like puppets, attacking at this point. So Dr. McGrew,
You do
or go
see
ahead.
the puppets sprinkled throughout this.
Yes.
Like there's a ton of reaction shots of the puppets. It's not like the puppets are not around. They're just hanging out as friends for a lot of this. And that is one thing
Mhm.
I did like about this. I was like, you do get to see the puppets all the way through the movie.
Yep. They're just kind of there, but they are there
Yeah.
during the whole movie. The main bully guy, he's so incensed that he was showed up by Tank in front of Jane that he tries to break into Jane's room to be problematic. But Pinhead fights him. Like Pinhead jumps on him and starts choking this guy. And also, the Pinhead, despite being super strong, is still just a puppet about that big. And so the bully ends up like throwing Pinhead on the ground and just like stomping the shit out of him. And at that point, Tank takes Pinhead inside to repair Pinhead, and ultimately does repair Pinhead, and so that like solidifies his and Jane's relationship. But while this is going on, Dr. McGrew is like, "Fuck this," and so he takes Blade and Tunneler and like just drops them off at the bully's house, and the puppets kill him. He's like weightlifting and like talking about all the terrible things he wants to do to Jane, and Blade gets up by his head and like slashes him across the face, and then Tunneler drills into his dick, and so this guy is now dead. I liked that scene. I didn't have any complaints about that. So the puppets have
There's
now
a
killed someone.
yeah, one of the I guess maybe there's more positive things about this one than initially I thought, because there was, I think, up to this point, this is probably the bloodiest Puppet Master movie. I mean, they really spray blood all over the place in this. With the guy's face. I mean, it's not like super graphic or anything, but just the amount of blood spray and gore. I don't think in the previous Puppet Master movies we really get a lot of that.
Yeah,
And
we
so,
saw a lot of like the aftermath of kills rather than the kills
right,
themselves.
this was continuity wise. Again, this is probably the first one that they really at least tried to make it bloody and violent. And I think was it Littlest Reich. They were like, this is the bloodiest
Yeah.
Puppet Master movie of all of them, but this one's pretty bloody for what it is.
Yeah, I feel like in some ways, and I don't want to give it too much credit, but I feel like in some ways with this movie, and then what was it? Retro Puppet Master came out like the year after this. I feel like they're trying at least. There's a level of effort put into this that you don't see in the more after like the 2000s.
There's
And
some cool Dutch angles and
yeah,
lighting
yeah.
coming through the fog and stuff. I mean, Dutch angles everywhere. I love that. That look nice.
Because I like at some point once we've finished all these movies, I want us to like pinpoint the point in the series where they absolutely give up, and I don't think they've given up completely here yet.
Yeah, that's coming up, and
They give up at the clip show.
it's called Puppet Master Legacy. That's where they
Yeah.
give up. We already know.
Luckily,
You'll see.
we're about like 4 movies away from that. I think 3 or 4. Anyway, so like the main bully is dead, and I obviously, like Matt and I have seen this before. I had it in my head that the puppets went and killed all the bullies, but no, they only kill like the ringleader. So it's
Yeah.
like I'm misremembering things about this movie. But Dr. McGrew, his murder is successful. He goes back home. Jane tells McGrew, I love Tank, and Dr. McGrew's like, oh no, like you need to stay away from that boy. Like these things just don't last. Like obviously Dr. McGrew has like nefarious things in mind for Tank. So, I mean, we'll just move to the conclusion. Suddenly, after this, like Tank starts getting really sick. Um, Dr. McGrew sends Jane away. He's like, "Oh, Jane, remember that thing that we were supposed to do like 6 hours away? Go do it for me." And so Jane just leaves. Uh, the cops interview the bully's friends and figure out that the Dr. McGrew was like basically the last person seen interacting with the dead guy now, and so the cops now have one missing person and one dead person that were like last interacted with by Dr. McGrew, and so they're going to go pursue him. Uh, Jane is Jane goes on this wild goose chase and somehow like realizes, I don't even know how she made this connection, but she leaves the area where she was supposed to pick up this thing that doesn't exist. She drives to the forest that her and Tank were at earlier, and she finds a really cool looking like puppet thing. She finds Matt, the character that we didn't see before, has been turned into a puppet, and he has been just like heavily scarred and burned. Half of his puppet face is missing, and
I like the
there's like a
eyeball.
skull there. Yeah, it's
The
like
eyeball's all bloody and it's moving around. It was
yeah,
a cool effect.
it's less like he was like it's less like his spirit was transferred into a puppet and more like his body was compressed into something puppet sized. I don't know how the best way to describe it, but it looks really cool. And obviously, like Matt is still alive because he starts like whining and grimacing and spasming as he's missing half his face and his eyeball is exposed and half his body is burned. Jane, rather than put her dear friend out of his misery, just like drops him on the ground and runs away. So Matt is just damned to this terrible existence forever.
This
Uh,
is the next movie, Charles Band. We need to know what happened to Matt. So
he's
bring
in the
Matt back.
comics. He's in the comics. I saw that at one point looking at, on the Puppet Master wiki. Like somehow, some way, there's like a puppet collector at one point in the comics, and they've acquired the Matt puppet. I don't know
I
how,
have to read these. I
but
have
it's
to read
there.
these comics.
Anyway, so Jane runs home because Jane knows, all right, my dad is up to something. And so we see Dr. McGrew has got Tank strapped to a table, and Dr. McGrew is going to transfer Tank's spirit slash soul slash essence into this puppet. And so Tank has been carving his own puppet. But the cops show up. And so the cops are trying to arrest Dr. McGrew, but Dr. McGrew like sicks the puppets on them. And Jester does something. Jester like cuts someone's leg. And then the other good puppets like actually finish the kill.
No.
And
Jester's there slicing the dude's face up with Blade the whole time. He's putting in work.
I mean,
He's putting in work.
Jester is there doing things, but it's really like Tunneler and Blade and Pinhead that are doing the killing.
No, No. Back me up on this. Jester's actually slicing the fuck out of that dude's face with blade.
I was actually going to comment on this and says Yester actually kills this dude.
Thank
Does
you.
he actually
Thank
kill
you.
this dude?
Well, I mean, they all do it together, but he's like actively taking
All right.
part in it, and
That's
not just sitting on a
that's fine.
shelf.
I was gonna say like Leech Woman is the Jester of this movie. Leech Woman does nothing. She is just there in various. Like, what does Leech Woman
Yeah.
do in this film?
I honestly
Great.
Be
kinda
in
forgot she
background
was even
shots.
in it.
Like
Yeah, she just reacts.
Leech Woman does nothing. So 2 cops are dead. So now it's just Dr. McGrew, and he successfully like lightning bolts come out of Tank's body and go into this puppet. And so now we see so Tank's essence has been transferred in this puppet. And we saw from the schematics that Tank was carving a wooden humanoid puppet. Because we saw the schematics, we saw like human feet, we saw human hands and legs and limbs, and he was carving out of wood. Somehow, some way, that has been turned into a completely metal puppet with like a long like tank barrel for like one arm, like fucking Megatron, and a giant TV screen for a head. And so Tank's face is now Tank's face has been like imposed on the screen. And at this point, like Dr. McGrew is like, finally, I've successfully like brought a puppet to life. And then all of the puppets rebel against. Stop me if you heard this one. The puppets rebel against the puppet master and start like just like beating the shit out of McGrew because I guess they felt like a connection to Tank, and now Tank has been harmed. So they don't kill McGrew, but they just incredibly like harm him. Like his face is cut to shit. There's blood everywhere, but he's still alive. And then Jane comes back and is like, Dad, what have you done? And then the tank puppet gets angry and shoots Dr. McGrew with lightning from his cannon arm, and Jane screams, and that's the end of the movie. It just cuts to credits. Like there's no resolution to any of this whatsoever.
I love that the tank has lightning powers. Like he doesn't shoot it. Like that was the visual effect they had ready at the time. So
Yeah,
like, sure, this is
It's
fine.
the same effect that like transferred his essence into the puppet. They're like, fuck it, we might as well do it again. It worked so well the first time. But the movie just ends. Like there's no resolution whatsoever.
I literally said out loud, "Are you fucking kidding me?" when the movie ended.
Ran out of money.
Yeah. Because I was like, oh man, I was ready for like 10 more minutes of Tank shooting people or something. Something more happening. Because boy, he looked stupid, huh? That was fun.
I wonder if there was supposed to be a sequel to this movie, and they just never were able to make it.
I wonder if there was supposed to be another 10 minutes and they couldn't film it because dude guy wouldn't show up to set.
That's true. He was sick.
That's possible.
Because the cut is very abrupt. But yeah, I remember like many years ago on our old podcast, like we watched all the Puppet Master movies, and there were only like 11 at the time, and even then we were commenting on the stupidity of this metal tank puppet that had been somehow carved from wood, and just the ridiculousness of this whole scenario. But that's Curse of Puppet Master. Thoughts, opinions.
My thoughts on this is that it sucks. It's bad. It's real bad. I was actually struck by how much of a romance this was. Like, I didn't have any recollection that there was so much lovey-dovey stuff between Tank and Jane and their weird, awkward courtship. There's a whole sequence in here where is it like a double dream sequence where she just shows up and she's like, I'm gonna fuck you now, basically, and they have sex. You don't see it. You see her kind of like buttoning up her top, and then he's got like chopped off doll legs or something when he pulls the sheet back. Like, I remember that kind of stuff, like the doll legs and stuff, but I had forgotten how kind of boring this movie is, just watching these two fall in love. They got no chemistry together. It's like, I don't buy that this girl would fall for Tank, and so much of the running time is just devoted to that. And then I also realized, like, okay, this is yet another one where the puppets are good guys, even though Jester finally does some shit here. They're hanging out, they're having fun. Like, I just don't like this movie at all.
I wanted to touch on that because I thought this movie is like treading some weird middle ground Because like, are the puppets good guys? Because they do kill people, and you can argue that
But they're
you know
killing the bad guys, right?
are they like? I mean, they killed the bully, which I'm okay with.
Right.
But then they killed two cops, and the cops are assholes. But the cops are legitimately correct that Dr. McGrew murdered someone, and now the cops are trying to arrest him. So
That's a good point.
I don't know that the puppets are good guys in this movie.
Okay.
Morally ambiguous, maybe.
Okay. I can see that. I
Yeah.
hadn't considered that, but maybe.
But now that I think
Maybe.
about it, there are only like 3 kills in this entire, or I guess maybe 4. We don't see McGrew die, so yeah, there's only
Yeah.
3 kills. They kill the bully, they kill the 2 cops. So when
That's
Matt
another
when
good
Matt
point.
when Matt was like, "This is like among the gorier movies," I was like, I don't know that I can
Well,
agree with that.
but the actual deaths are much gorier than the deaths shown in the previous
Okay.
movies. Like you'll get 20 seconds of blood spraying and people screaming, and they at least made the actual act of violence that the puppets are doing a lot more violent than what we've seen in the previous movies. Last or Little Strike aside, obviously, but just in the main sort of Puppet Master movies, can you think of a more bloodier, violent death in any of these things that we've seen?
I think in part 3, like Tunneler drills through a guy's back, but I don't remember how bloody that was. That's the only thing that's coming to mind though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just the length of the kills, no matter I mean how minor they may be, and the amount of blood that they were spraying all over the place, it seemed to me more violent than the others.
Oh,
But yeah,
Bork,
it's a good point. Not many people died.
what did you think of this film?
After finishing it and reading that it took them 8 days to shoot this and they couldn't even utilize the full cast in all those 8 days, I'm like, okay, this makes sense. This feels cheap, which I've said about a lot of these. But this feels cheap in the way that there's just not a lot going on here. There's not a lot of characters. There's not a lot of death sequences. It's just like I don't think I had the problem with the pacing as much with this movie, but that's only because it's so short.
Yeah,
Um,
it is short.
and I don't know. Like there was a part of me that was actually kind of intrigued. I think I'm enjoying like the first 10 to 15 minutes of like every time I throw on one of these movies and it's just completely different. I'm just okay, I guess we're doing this now. I guess this is some weird tourist trap sideshow attractions. I wonder what the puppets are going to get up to here. So I wasn't really bored by this, but I mean this it's pretty rough.
Yeah, and what are your thoughts, Steve? How do you feel about this one?
I didn't hate it. Like
Didn't hate it. Okay.
maybe I'm not saying it's good. And I remember like many years ago when we did a full watch through of the series, like I feel like I was very negative on this movie. Maybe it's just because I have seen like true garbage in the series now with like the whole Axis trilogy and the Blade standalone film. I I it's not good, but I feel like I'm much more positive on it than I was many years ago when I last
This
watched
is
it.
like your subspecies 3.
Maybe it
Where
is.
you're like, this is the one I actually
I
kind of like,
I
even though
like
it's bad.
there's a lot of interesting things in this movie. I like that the puppets are just not
Yeah, that's
I
fair.
like the puppets that are not a secret. Um I think like the idea of this person like carving their own puppet, having no idea that they're going to be forced to live in that puppet's body, or kind of sorta. I thought that was like a cool idea. Like there's a lot of cool ideas in here that they just don't do a good job with. Now it's like, were they ever going to do a good job with it? And it was like budget and actor availability issues that fucked with it, or was it just never going to pay off? Like I have no idea, but I don't know. I think this is a perfectly fine like mid-tier Puppet Master movie, but I can only saying that knowing how truly garbage the shit tier is.
I think that's fair. You might
Yeah.
be kind of swaying me a little bit because I came into this like, man, this movie's trash. But as we've spoken about it, I'm like, there are moments, like there are specific moments from this movie that I still remember years later. I do think the some of the ideas that you sort of brought up here are kind of cool ideas. I guess maybe I miss it when I'm watching it because I'm so focused on the shitty aspects of this movie, that I'm not really like
Yeah.
taking all that stuff in. Though I will say, when I rewatch them, like the puppets are in this they're all over the place. They
Yeah.
actually feel like characters in an ensemble where it's not we go 30 minutes before we see Blade pop his head out or anything. Like they don't do
Yeah,
much, like
the
you said, but
characters
they
are
are there.
the human characters are having dinner, and the puppets are just sitting there like near the table with them, just chilling.
Yeah.
I
And this
like
has
that.
more
That's
Jester
cool.
in it than
Yeah,
anything we've seen, I think. Jester's all over this movie. So, okay, you're pulling me to your side,
yeah.
Steve.
Like
Maybe it's not as bad as I
there's an
think it is.
element of like body horror in this film. Have we seen that in previous Puppet Master movies? What happens to the Matt puppet is fucking horrific.
Yeah, the Mad Puppet looks cool too. It does look really, really cool. The body horror aspect, I would just say like the end of Puppet Master 2 where she's in like the mannequin kind of thing. That looks creepy and I would argue is a little body horror-ish. But yeah, I think maybe there's an element of tragedy in this with the Matt Puppet that we just don't get in the rest of them. Borp, are you being swayed at all?
I mean, yeah, I like. Okay. I think the way I sort of rank these movies in my head, it's like, okay, there are a couple ones that I actually like, and then all the other ones are like, what are the ones that are most interesting to me? Because I don't like any of them, but like, guess that's part of my brain going where I'm like thinking about the making of these movies, thinking of how they're paced and of how they're put together, and like from that perspective, I actually do kind of enjoy this one more than a lot of the other ones we've seen. Um, yeah, I guess consider me swayed a little bit.
We love it. Curse of the Puppet Master is awesome. It's top tier of the
Compared
franchise.
to a lot of the previous movies, yes, this is
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah,
top
for
tier.
sure.
Well, guys, we're just moving. We keep going up and up and up and up and up. So, what's next, Steve? What are we talking about
I
next?
think next I believe we are finally at parts 4 and 5, and then after that is the clip show, and then after that's when we got to figure out what we're doing with Demonic Toys and versus Demonic Toys, and I think the last one we would watch would be the new Doctor Death standalone, which I have no idea what that's about, but I believe that is I believe that's actually set in like modern day ish, so it's not a prequel like all the other ones with
Okay.
the old characters in it. So I feel like we got like 6 movies left. We got 4 or 5 clip show,
Oh
Demonic
God.
Toys, Doctor Death standalone.
And
We are going to
Puppet
watch
Master
the
versus
actual
Demonic Toys,
Demonic Toys.
Okay.
Yeah. I
We're
can't say
getting there.
the end is in sight. It's
Mhm.
still
How's
far
Demonic
away.
Toys? Do people like that one?
I remember liking Demonic Toys, but I probably haven't watched it in 30 years.
Okay.
Yeah, and by the time we're done getting through the Puppet Master franchise, fellas, Charles Band will have released 3 others, so probably
Well,
won't never.
there's at least that Leech Woman movie coming out.
Supposedly, to tell the
Yeah, I mean,
story of how she.
It might just be a scam.
Maybe
Who
that's
knows?
the thing. Maybe that's the thing. So I think it's called like Furnace Leech Woman or something like that, where she's all burned up and everything. Maybe that will connect the Curse of the Puppet Master continuity to the main timeline by showing actually this takes place after 4 and 5 because she was rebuilt or something after she gets burned to a crisp in part 2. Maybe.
I'm gonna put
Maybe?
the link
Okay.
to the wiki in the chat. According to the wiki, the official name of the Matt puppet is either Freak or Mutant, and it looks pretty fucking gnarly. So yeah, I think they should have done more of this.
That looks cool.
Yep.
All right, everybody, stay tuned in 2 weeks for another episode of Full Moon Fridays here on Outpost Unknown. We will be talking Puppet Master 4, and these were shot, ahead of time, these were shot back to back, like all at once. So I don't know if we watch 4 and 5 and just record them the same day, or if we're literally gonna like spread it out. But it's literally one story chopped into 2 pieces. We'll figure it out. But anyway, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your time. Don't waste your life like we are with ours.